fellow gastronomes, and welcome to Dirty Belly, where we take you on a journey as your food goes from dirt to your belly. I'm your host, a dad who loves to eat and grow, Jeff Sims, and I am here today with our resident culinarian, Matt Gaddis.
Hey, that's me.
And a special shout out to our producer, Will Gray, who is out there somewhere floating in the ether. Hello, Matt. How are you
Hello.
today?
Man, I'm so good. I'm so fired up to get this started. I didn't know how intense I was going to be about this subject until we jumped into it. And I have just been pouring info into my brain for the last couple of days. So yeah, I'm very excited. How you doing, man?
I'm great. I love food. I love to eat. Sometimes I eat too much, which is maybe I need to buy a new wardrobe sometime soon because I eat a lot. But no, it's cool to start something like this, a journey together, where we can learn and grow, and we can help people understand more about the food that they eat and where it comes from and how to make it delicious, right? Speaking of delicious food, let's start with our first question that we're probably going to ask on every episode. What's the best thing you ate this week?
my my answer to this one is going to be absolutely ridiculous. So I haven't done a lot of cooking for myself this week. Most of what I've done is family meal at the restaurant, and we did sloppy joes a few days ago, and boy, I'm telling you, I was breaking brains with that. In case anyone's not aware of a sloppy Joe, which I think you've been living under a rock in a cave inside of a turd. Uh, yeah, just some ground beef, way more ketchup than belongs in any recipe at all. Molasses, dry spices, and throw that on a bun, and holy cow! It's comfort. It's comfort.
Yeah, if you don't know what a sloppy Joe is, I'm going to assume that you were homeschooled.
You should
Okay.
stop. You should stop listening. Is what you should do.
Yeah, that's like the staple of cafeteria food, I think, in schools. And honestly, it's easy. I can see it as a family meal. For those of you who don't know, family meal is in a restaurant. A lot of times, chefs will throw together something just free for all the staff to eat, right? Because uh, hungry cooks and waiters don't do well, right? They struggle.
Yeah, well, one of the best parts about working in a restaurant, I think, is because we take all demographics, we take everyone from all walks of life, but the idea that if you work in a kitchen, you never go hungry is very important to me. Like it's a perk of the job. You get a meal every day, no, regardless of your home life. It's I think that's a very serious part of what we do is making sure that not only our customers are fed, but that the people we work with are fed and happy and satisfied and able to work.
Yeah, because it's like a family style atmosphere up there, and the fellowship of the family meal really helps bring that together. Everybody sitting together before we all get tossed into the weeds and just treated like redheaded stepchildren. It's good for everybody to come together and talk about their day and enjoy a meal together.
Shout out redheads.
Yeah, for me, the best thing I ate was tacos al carbon, which is basically just a grilled taco dish. But it came from a new Mexican restaurant I found that opened up the road down the road from me, and someone had invited me there earlier in the week, and I showed up and they weren't there, and they texted me and said, "Oh, I'm at the wrong restaurant. Come down here." And I was really disappointed because this place used to be a Burger King. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's a hole in the wall, and when I walked in, it was filled with Hispanic construction workers, and that's when you know you're in the right spot. Okay,
Oh hell yeah!
like very few people in that place actually spoke English, and so disappointedly, I went and got in my car and went down the street and had a mediocre meal.
Oh
But
no!
I came back with my uncle later that week because I knew I had to come back, right, and had the best Mexican food I've had in my town in my entire life. I mean, it was I should have taken pictures of it and so I could share them, but it just looked so good when it came to me that I just instantly started gorging myself, right?
Are
So I
you
got
on
this.
the on the Birria train yet or
Yeah,
Birria?
I took one of those home for my wife. I got the tacos burrito. So, But the tacos al carbone, it's just like a grilled steak taco. This one had some fresh onion cilantro on it. Had some, I always judge a Mexican restaurant on their rice and beans, right? Because if you can make that great, then everything else is going to be great. A lot of times, poor restaurants don't make that very great. It's always very plain, and theirs was well seasoned. So I knew this was going to be a special meal, and it really was. And so I'll definitely be going back there. So that was a great find for me, and it's going to change my eating habits. And like I said, I'm worried about my waistline right now, especially finding such a delicious Mexican restaurant right up the road from me.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil anything, but I know my answer for next week's episode is going to be a lot more interesting. I've got a couple of good meals lined up. Yeah, I'm not going to spill the tea quite yet.
Places you're going to eat out. We're from the Nashville area, by the way. So are you going to be eating out in Nashville? Is that what you're planning? Or are you planning on cooking something?
Yeah, I've got one spot I'm going to head to that I'll be going to on Thursday morning, and I'll be shouting them out when the time comes. But I'm very excited. It's going to be a tasty meal.
Speaking of tasty meals, one of my favorite meals, Morel mushrooms.
Good segue. Good segue.
Today's ingredient that we will be discussing. I guess we'll start out with what are morels for people who don't know, because it's not a common ingredient, is it?
No, it's hyper seasonal. So think along the lines of something like a fiddlehead fern or a ramp, something that has a very, very limited season. But at the end of the day, it's a mushroom. You can apply it the same way you would another mushroom, but I've found that the key to morels is not to hide them. You don't want to chop up a morel and throw it into a duxelle or something else like that. Like you want to let that ingredient shine.
Yeah, and if you've never seen a morel, imagine if a mushroom made it with a sponge, and that's what it would look like. Okay, I mean it's like it got a very brainy kind of texture on the upper cap.
Yeah, they look gnarly.
One of my favorite things about the morel is how like it acts like a sponge. It soaks up the flavor around it. Now, when we talk about morels, what we're specifically talking about is mushrooms in the family of Morchella. Okay, that's the scientific name for the family. There's a lot of different breeds of Morchella mushrooms. There's more than a dozen that we found in North America, and at least that many in Europe as well. So there's a pretty wide variety. There's red, green, not green. There's red, black, white. There's a lot of different stuff going on with morel mushrooms.
There's one called blushing, which I thought was very cute.
If you live in our area, you're probably most familiar with black morels. They're such an interesting ingredient, and they've gotten a lot of unique names throughout the years that they've been eaten locally. In the United States, they're called dryland fish because when you cut them lengthwise and open them up, it looks like a fillet of fish almost. Hickory chickens, that's what they call them in Kentucky. They're called Merkles or miracles based on folklore of how a mountain family was once saved from starvation by eating morel mushrooms. Molly moochers, muggins, muggles, sponge mushroom, waffle mushroom, haystacks, snakeheads. A lot of different names for these things. And that's how you know you found a good ingredient when there's a lot of different nicknames for it, because that means people are talking about it, right?
Can you start calling me waffle mushroom?
Yes. If you call me snakehead, we got a deal.
Yes. Yeah, I'm in. Hell yeah, snakehead.
Flavor wise, they kind of have like an earthy, woody flavor, even more so than a normal mushroom. Wouldn't you say, Matt?
Yeah. It's very intense. It's so my favorite mushroom outside of a morel is a maitake, also known as a hen of the woods mushroom. They've got very, very deep, woodsy flavor, I think would be the best way to describe it. Like almost like tree bark or like a forest floor. Whereas a morel kind of ramps that up into infinity, and especially when you cook the ingredient on its own and just experience it for itself, it really boosts that. Which again, I know I'm doubling back here, but my favorite ways to cook morels is to just highlight that single ingredient. And I mean, if I was presented a bowl of crispy pan fried morels, then I mean that's probably the best dish I can think of.
Yeah, and that's a traditional way to cook them. Honestly, it's just pan fried. It's closely related. Actually, the closest mushroom to the morel on the genealogical tree is actually the truffle, which is another amazing mushroom. So uh, there's a lot of really good stuff going on that branch of the mushroom tree there. If we're talking about what makes up a morel, it's 90% water, 5% carbohydrate, 3% protein, 1% fat. It's a great source of manganese, phosphorus, zinc, vitamin D because it does sit in the sun, and iron. Um, Matt, tell me, what was the first time you ever tried a morel?
So I have this really fun memory that was sparked by our conversation. So years and years ago, tiny little baby, know nothing Matt. Uh, I have to think I was probably 7 or 8 years old at the most. Um, so my grandmother took me out to, this is in mid South Indiana. Um, Went out to this nondescript trailer where some potentially terrifying but very friendly people
This is the
greeted us.
beginning of a great story.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I remember we hiked for longer than my tiny body was comfortable with. But when we got to their spot, there were so morels like to grow on the north side of trees, and so every tree on the north side had two or three morels. It was an insane spot, like it's a way higher concentration than you normally have. And these spots are coveted by families. Like there are morel hunting grounds that are passed down through generations, just to keep
Ancient
the
family
secret.
secrets. Yeah.
Yeah,
Ancient
yeah,
family.
yeah. It really is a family secret. So we were lucky enough to get in on that. Uh, had a full day of hunting and came back, and so my grandmother was very very simple with her cooking. Like the number one snack at her place was a hard fried egg on white bread with black pepper and mayonnaise. Like that's my whole heritage right there. So we got back, took these morels and just pan fried them up with some butter and just snacked on them. Sat around the dining room table, chatted and snacked on them. And obviously for years I didn't understand the importance uh, of that experience. So the lessons that really told me, now that I look back on it, one is foraging. Now, a quick disclaimer before I move on. Always, for anyone out there listening, be insanely careful when you're foraging. If you are 1% unsure what you are looking at, do not eat it. Consult a friend, consult some text, find a website. You have to be extremely careful when you're foraging because you can eat some stuff that'll make you poop liquid or worse.
And there
Uh,
are also, as part of the disclaimer, there is a breed known as a false morel, which looks kind of like a morel that will kill you.
Yeah, yeah. If the stem is not hollow on a morel, throw it out. The stem needs to be hollow. Anyway, so what the first lesson was foraging, like experiencing an ingredient that we found growing from the earth, growing from the dirt, and then directly gave us nourishment and joy. And we sat around having a great time with it. It was a connection to earth and family that I didn't really appreciate at the time, but now I kind of recognize it for what it really was. And the other lesson is purity of an ingredient, not not messing too much with what nature has to offer. So when I say simple pan fried, what that really means is taking this beautiful mushroom and intensifying the flavors, and to saute that in butter inherently creates a brown butter. So you've got a little sauce there, just a touch of salt. It makes crispy edges. It's got a gummy, soft interior, and we just ate that like popcorn. And it was a really formative experience for me before I even realized to just take this one thing and process it the right way and get so much joy from it. No complicated recipes, nothing like that. And I'm sure later on, and for other subjects, we'll get into complicated recipes. But this is an ingredient, the Morel, that really sings on its own, and that was very important to me to understand for my cooking journey.
Yeah, and I will say that it is important to cook morels because they are slightly toxic until they're cooked. So I think it's
Yes.
thermotoxic, something like that. But it's when the heat deactivates the toxin. So you don't want to eat morels. It's a mushroom that you don't want to eat raw. They do need to be cooked.
Absolutely. Here's a little good time for a little fun fact. Morels contain small amounts of hydrazine toxins. So hydrazine toxins with acute exposure, like if you were to eat like a pound bag of morel mushrooms, there could be irritation in your olfactory senses. There could be all the way up to seizures. It could cause a coma if you have enough of it. That's a little crazy. You don't need to worry about that. But the cooking process kind of purges the hydrazine toxins out of it. Another fun
Breaks them
fact
down,
is,
I believe. Yeah.
yeah, it is apparently inadvisable to eat even cooked morels with alcohol, which is insane to me because most of the time when I see a morel on a restaurant menu, I'm drinking wine, and apparently you shouldn't do that. It'll mess up your liver.
I like what you were saying about the foraging and the connection of the connection of finding your food and getting it out of the earth.
Oh, I lost you for a second there, buddy. What were you saying?
I loved what you were saying about foraging and how it connects you to the earth and where your food comes from. Because for me, that was one of my primary goals in starting this podcast was helping people understand where their food comes from. Because one of the loves that I've learned recently is gardening and just how rewarding it is just to take a little tiny seed and then months later you're just have a bountiful harvest, right? And you're eating these things that came out of the or created out of nothing but soil, water, and sunlight. And it's the miracle of life. And yeah, I really connected that when you said that. Now, the first time I ate a morel, I was much older. I was already in my culinary career days. I was working at a local fine dining establishment. I came into work around 11, hungover, just not wanting to be there in general. It was just the cooks there starting their prep. We didn't serve lunch in this restaurant. The servers were off still somewhere asleep, I'm sure. I came in, and instead everybody just kind of moping around, minding their own business. Everybody was so excited. I was like standing there for a little while and I'd do my stuff, and I finally asked him, I was like, "What's going on today?" And they're like, "Oh, morels are coming in." It's like, "Okay, what's a morel?" It's like, "It's a mushroom." I was like, "All right, I guess." And this guy shows up in like a beat up old truck. He just comes in with like some old plastic Kroger bags full of these things that like they have dirt all over them. I'm
Yes.
looking at them, I'm like, "What is this? Like, this looks weird. I've never seen anything like this, right?" It's got that kind of brainy kind of texture, spongy. You pick it up and you squeeze it, and it's like, I don't know if I want to eat this. Right? Like,
I don't
this
know
is
about
like,
this.
I
I don't know
don't
about
know.
this.
But they're like, "All right, don't worry." So they wash them off, and we did ours saltine cracker crust pan fried in some butter, and oh my goodness, what a life changing experience!
Oh,
Because
you crusted the actual mushroom with
yeah,
saltine crackers, like
yeah,
a batter.
yeah, crushed them up real fine, and then just did like a light egg wash, and then tossed in the cracker crust and throw it in there. That's like a
Ooh.
classic recipe in Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee. Um, that
Of course, these Indiana folks are coming out with saltine cracker battered mushrooms. Like, what are we doing here?
so I'm still skeptical, but if you have any friends that are cooks or chefs and you see them get really excited about a food, you need to try it, right? So I was like, all right, I'm gonna do it, right? So I take my bite. Oh my goodness, like what a savory, umami, woodsy, crispy on the outside, the perfect like creaminess, kind of chewy on the inside. Just like a life changing experience for me because I'd always kind of liked mushrooms, but I never realized how much I could really love a mushroom until I had a morel, because there's really not another mushroom like it. You know, a lot of times mushrooms are very similar to each other. You know, they might have a different shape or different color, but you know, it's a very similar experience. If you've eaten one mushroom, you've eaten a lot. You've eaten a lot of the mushrooms, but especially with the morel and the truffle, they're just so different than anything else, and it was really a magical experience for me. So if you haven't ever tried a morel, I really highly recommend. We may be in morel season right now. To
We're
get
right
out there.
there. We're right in Tennessee. We're looking at late March to late March to about mid May is when you're going to find them in Tennessee.
Yeah, and it really is a life changing experience if you're into culinary stuff and you love trying new foods. I mean, there isn't for me. The truffle and the morel are 1A, 1B for the best mushrooms out there.
I love your bit about the guy showing up in a truck, because like morels and truffles both kind of exist in the same place. So morel actual cultivation, intentional cultivation, didn't come around until about 2004 2006. So much like truffles, the way you would get morels is some guy or some person would show up at the back door of your restaurant with a briefcase or some bags, and you just bought them like drugs. Like it was very like organized crime almost. Like
And like,
somebody just
don't you
shows up with thousands of dollars worth of mushrooms in a bag, and if you want them, you got them. That was
yeah,
your
and
one shot.
don't you dare ask where it came from. You know what I
No,
mean?
no,
Because
no, 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 no.
you ain't finding out, and like they may pull evasive maneuvers on their way out of there to make sure they're not followed back to their spot.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
you know, like you're right. You know, talking about the cultivation of morel mushrooms, that for the longest time we were unable to cultivate them in any sort of commercial setting. You know, it's a spore shooter. It Morels are asexual reproducers, and they reproduce by releasing spores, and those spores become more mushrooms. It's not
Same.
actually hard to grow the morel mushroom plant itself, or the fungi itself. The earliest that I could find that somebody actually grew the fungi was in 1901. A guy like with some flower pots in a cave. But the problem is getting them to fruit, because every year they're either going to expand underground or they're going to produce a fruit. And so to get a consistent commercial production, you have to consistently first you have to figure out what causes that fruiting and make it happen every year on a consistent basis, or else you're just going to be growing stuff under the ground and you're never going to have morels. And in 1986, there were 3 patents filed by researchers Gary Mills and James Malachowski at Michigan State, which described a method for growing them and coaxing them to produce fruit. And like you said, in the early 2000s, they got to a point where they were growing hundreds of pounds of morels every week. Well, then comes the 2008 financial crash, and it kind of killed everything that they were doing. They did have an investor before that, the guy that started Domino's Pizza, Tom Monaghan, was trying to get it commercially viable. The biggest issue for them was cost of energy and cost of labor to produce them. And like I said, the 2008 financial crash just kind of killed everything. But recently, we have some really good news, right? In 2021, the Danish Morel project announced an indoor cultivation method that can produce 20 pounds of morels per square yard at a cost similar to white button mushroom production, which is pretty cheap. It's the cheapest mushroom. If you love morels, this is a huge development, right? Because this means in the future, you might be able to get to a point where you could go to your grocery store and just see them in a pack sitting next to your white buttons. And
That's insanity. That one time in my life, I went to a grocery store and I saw fresh morels on the shelf, and I thought I was taking crazy pills, man. Like it seemed insane to me. So yeah, the idea to encounter that on the regular is crazy. Although, I kind of like the preciousness of the ingredient being so hard to find and so seasonal. But boy, what a treat for everybody if those are around.
yeah, obviously they're pretty hush hush about what they're doing, but I did read a little bit about it, and they're growing them in trays indoors with very specific humidity temperature controls. And the biggest trick that I saw was that they're actually growing them with grass. Now, historically, when people have tried to cultivate them, what they did was they created a spore slurry where they would take the spores with some water and some molasses, and they would pour it over shaded hardwood mulch that was in the shade, and then they would feed it with a wood ash and water mixture because there's often been a belief that they're more prominent after a forest fire. Um, so, and they were, some people were able to get them, but it was never get them to grow and fruit, but it was never on a consistent basis where you could have a Morel mushroom company and rely on the profits every year.
Yeah.
So,
Have you
you know,
have you ever seen a mushroom growing operation?
yes,
That's a
there's
vague question, I know.
yeah, there's a local farm that grows mushrooms that I've seen some of the stuff that they're doing. It's pretty cool what they were
Yeah,
doing.
they're not unlike like a sterile lab that you would see in a sci-fi movie or something. It's so far removed from what you would think of from like just farming or gardening from the ground. It's very controlled. People are wearing like the white suits. All the substrates are vacuum sealed. It's a super scientific process that I am way too dumb to understand, but is fascinating to see.
Yeah, it is, and it just goes to show the how complicated it is to grow new types of mushrooms in commercial settings, right? Because it takes a lot, and it's a very scientific process. It's easy to grow corn, right, or tomatoes, right? If you throw some tomato seeds on the ground in May, you're going to have tomato plants. It's
Yeah,
not
yeah, yeah.
it's not a difficult thing to grow tomatoes, right? It may be a difficult thing to grow good tomatoes, but uh, it's not hard to get them to grow, right? Or potatoes or anything like that. But mushrooms is like it's a science, and you have to learn it and you have to refine it. And hopefully, we're getting there with Morels because I when I read this about that they may be able to cultivate them commercially. I mean, it's like I gave a little yip inside, like, oh my goodness, are you kidding me? Like I could go to the store and I could get some fresh Morels and take them home and make a nice pasta with Morels in them or something like that. It sounds great. Um,
If
where
I could get Morels independently, like, then that will become my number one flex, like hands down.
Now I was looking up like foraging techniques because I was going to try to do a little section of the podcast on foraging techniques, but there's so many different types of morels that grow in uh, different ways in different areas that it's hard to get like a set type of thing. And the best thing is if you can find somebody that will trust you enough to take you out morel hunting. That's a hard thing to find because like we were talking about earlier, these are well guarded secrets where people find their morels because they're very valuable currently.
Yeah.
If you were going to try to buy morels, what would you do?
So there are no. I'm speaking from a professional standpoint. From a personal standpoint, I wouldn't know. I would have to find a guy that knows a guy. From a professional standpoint, there are a couple of companies that specialize in hyper seasonal ingredients. One that comes to mind would be a place called McCooney Wild Harvest out of Washington State. They specialize in things like ramps and morels and fiddleheads. So you probably couldn't get fresh morels year round, but if you find a specialty company that has that kind of expertise, then what they do is freeze dry uh, those things when they're in season, and then you can get them all year long. I know at a previous restaurant I worked at, we worked with them to do some ramps and preserved them for a year, and we're able to do a like a liquefied ramp as a steak sauce. So it gives you an opportunity to use some of these hyper seasonal ingredients in ways that you really couldn't before.
Yeah, you can look on Google right now and find lots of dried morel mushroom sources out there. Now it's not cheap, I'll tell you, and I'll be honest, it's not going to be the same as eating a fresh morel. I mean, you're going to have to soak it in water to rehydrate it, or cook it in a long braise with something to really to reconstitute it, and it's going to be soggier and it's going to be hard to get a crust on it like it would a fresh morel. But you'll get
Yeah,
the basic idea. It would be good for a soup or a pasta or something like that. I wouldn't use it for a fried morel or a butter sauteed morel or anything like that, but there's are some uses for it, and you can get the idea for what a morel is and the flavor of a morel. Now, if I was going to try to find Morels currently, I would probably go to something like Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist and look for some, like I said, some old guy in a dusty truck who's, hey man, you got the Morels? Hey, what you got? Or
Yeah,
if you
hang
have,
on me.
yeah, and it's like I said, it's not going to be cheap because people
Something to be said
currently.
though. Sorry. Something to be said though. I think with the dried morels and rehydrating, uh, because of how intense that flavor is. If you want to experience that flavor and you only have access to a freeze dried or preserved or something, uh, make yourself a little sauce. Be a little saucy boy about it. Like that flavor translates into a cream so well, so you could steep those mushrooms in a warm, heavy cream, and create yourself a beautiful little pasta sauce with that. So you're not going to get all the fun of the texture and the crispy edges, but you're going to get an amazing flavor. Uh, I mean, throw that on mushroom ravioli. Do that instead of an Alfredo sauce with your pasta. You got a million options. If you can sauce it, you can do it, baby.
Yeah, and you could try your local farmers market. You might have luck there, or you might be able to talk to the farmers there to see if they know people who hunt morels that would sell them. There are morel festivals that happen in the United States. I assume that you would be able to buy morels at these festivals.
Morel Festival.
Yeah. Um, so
I'm gonna need to look at that. I'm gonna need
you
to look
don't
at that.
have to be able to go out there and find the morels to eat them. Like it's possible to find them otherwise. And I know that local purveyors, culinary purveyors for restaurants around here have been carrying them the last few years, in season and sometimes even out of season. We were able to order fresh morels from places like Cisco or Gordon Food Service, stuff like that. That might be an option. Obviously you can't order from Cisco if you're just a normal person, but Gordon Food Service has brick and mortars. They might be a place to try.
That's crazy that they would handle morels. That that is wild.
But the more specialty the purveyor, the more likely you are to find it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Gordon Food Service may not be the place to go. I haven't actually called them, so please everybody call them at once. Let's blow them up. Okay.
Yes. Everybody call Gordon Food Service. Let's call it at 4 p.m. tomorrow, right before they go home. Really ruin everybody's day.
If you have local, organic style grocery stores, we have a place here called Sprouts. You may go down there and ask them. They may be able to do a special order for you. They're going to have a lot more connections with specialty purveyors, right? That may be able to. You may have to order it by the case, but they may be able to get you some. And what I'm hearing about the commercially produced ones that we're starting to see, and that hopefully is going to be the future of morel mushrooms, is that they're actually better from a culinary standpoint because they don't have the bugs, they don't have the dirt, you don't actually have to wash them per se.
Yeah.
So, and washing mushrooms has always been a big no-no in the culinary field, but you can do it with a lot of the button mushrooms and stuff. It's not going to make a big deal, but something that's like a sponge, like a morel, it really does affect the texture of it. You're going to soak up a lot of water when you do that.
Yeah, and another important note for those of you that can get your hands on fresh morels. We touched on earlier that stem needing to be hollow. That's how you have a proper morel and not absolute poison for your terrible body. The the process of washing is also very important. You want to cut them in half lengthwise and get into that hollow stem because dirt and insects can take up residence in that stem. So the best way I've heard, a lot of people say you have to soak them overnight in salt water. That's not true. All you have to do is get some warm to hot salt water, soak them for 4 minutes, and then kind of clean out all the gunk. Because there's nothing that's going to survive more than 4 minutes in hot salt water that you need to worry about. So important cleaning technique. So you're not eating dirt and bugs, or if you want to eat dirt and bugs, we're not here to judge. We're not here to throw labels on people. If you're a dirt and bug person, then I support you fully.
If you're listening to Dirty Belly, you might be a dirt person. I don't know.
I mean, I am a dirt person, so I mean, we're right there. I think you know
Part of
that.
gardening is you have to know the pH of your soil, and a lot of old gardeners believe that they could taste the pH. So it's not uncommon, I think, for people to
Oh,
put dirt in their mouth.
oh, that's wild.
I want to take a second to talk about like the history of the morel mushroom. There's not really a lot out there about the history of morel mushrooms. What we do know, they were first recorded in 1753 by my mycologist Carl Linnaeus in his Species Plantarum, and he didn't really know what it was, but he classified it, and then it was later reclassified as the Morchella. And there's a lot of subspecies of Morchellas now, and there's still some argument about what is a subspecies, what is just one that just looks a little different. There's the same species. A lot of this is still contested, and what we're learning about these mushrooms is changing as we go along. They're believed to have descended from Verpa mushrooms in the early Cretaceous period, 129 million years ago, probably in the Mediterranean basin. Some people think maybe North America. They grow in both. And what they're doing with this is they're looking at what makes the plant, what makes the fungus unique, and then they're kind of tracing those traits back, right? And to fungus that they knew existed in those time periods. Mushrooms historically have been feared, or they've both been feared due to toxicity, and they've also been prized at the same time, right? Because a lot of times people would eat a mushroom and they would die, right? But a lot of times people would eat a mushroom and have a spiritual journey, right? So
you eat a mushroom and you see everything.
You see a lot of mushrooms in spiritual rituals throughout history, and they've been known to be used for medicinal purposes. And they're high in protein and stuff, so they do have some good uses in those fashions. Mushrooms in general became popular in America in the late 19th century, which of course is right after the Civil War. In her book 100 Mushroom Recipes, Kate Sargent in 1899 wrote, "The general opinion in this country regarding mushrooms has been that with one or two exceptions, all form of fungus growth are either poisonous or unwholesome. But it is very gratifying to observe the change that is rapidly taking place in the public mind. Soon public opinion will acknowledge that it is an established fact that the great majority of the larger funguses, especially those that grow in the fields and other open places, is not only wholesome but highly nutritious." So you can see that when she's talking about this, like there is a change that's happening right here. And part of me, as I'm sitting here thinking about it, is I wonder if it has something to do with the Civil War, right? Because it changes right after the Civil War. And
yeah,
you think about people like living out in the woods.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. Like,
and they're hungry.
This is just my armchair opinion and thought here, but yeah, maybe being forced to do more traveling in the woods and to be foraging, because I'm sure the buffet was not fantastic on the battlefield in the Civil War. It's probably the crab legs probably weren't like great. They're probably a little old at that point. But yeah, the idea that, and I think a lot of really great culinary stuff comes from this sense of necessity. You seek out these ingredients that are maybe not the most desirable or the most interesting or wanted, and then you turn them into something beautiful. I think you really hit on something good there. Necessity definitely breeds creativity, and which breeds deliciousness.
Yeah, and I mean, if I was in the woods fighting in a war, I might try a mushroom. I might just see it. I'm hungry. I might just be like, "Hey, that looks pretty good over there. I might just eat that. What's the worst that's going to happen? I'm going to be out of this war, right?"
I would try anything at that. I'd be eating sticks, man. I don't know, like like this sucks. Like that dude's leg just got shot off by a cannonball, which is something I saw in a movie. I want nothing to do with that.
Yeah, I got a charge of muskets tomorrow, and I'm hungry. You know what I mean? Like I'm going to eat anything, right? I'll boil rubber if I have to. Oh yeah, we got a comment in the chat here. Sledge it real good says same kind of thing happened with collard greens, which is a weed at the end of the day. Necessity builds creativity. Good point there. Yeah.
Great shout out too. When we were researching ingredients, collard greens and Swiss chard are also in season right now. So maybe another path we go down in a forthcoming episode.
I'd love to talk about some greens. I love cooking greens, and it's a very southern thing to do. That's interesting now that Sledge It Real Good it brought that up. It sounds like it has an interesting history, so I'm kind of interested to go down that road and learn a little bit about that. And Dad Hat Wrestling says, best name for a podcast I've ever seen. Well, thank you for that.
Also,
I originally wanted to. Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
I think maybe that logo. I mean, that the hair's not right, but that might be an actual depiction of myself.
I thought that's what it was. You didn't pose for that?
Well, I mean, not that I'm aware of. I don't know who's snapping shots when I'm just like working myself in the mirror. But
our producer Will's probably got some pictures somewhere he used.
Oh, he definitely has some pictures. He's got some dirt on me. He's got the dirty belly for sure.
But the name I originally wanted to call it Dirt to Belly because it was the idea I had for the podcast, going talking about everything that goes into making food. And Matt said that sounds like an NPR thing. We're not doing that. We're going to call it Dirty Belly. And I was like, that's perfect, and that's how it was born. So here we are. We are the Dirty Belly Boys. And if you think about it, we all do have dirty bellies because most of our food comes from the dirt, and it's just dirt transformed, and that's what we're eating. So let's talk about some recipes and how to cook them. Matt, you're the expert here, so I'm gonna let you go, and then I might throw in a little bit extra stuff if you don't cover everything I want to.
Yeah. So we kind of touched on this earlier, and so for my experience, cooking Morels has always been showcasing the ingredient itself. Either just a dish of Morels or pairing with maybe some, like a cipollini onion or some asparagus tips, especially some like spring asparagus or white asparagus. Something that's some other ingredients that are seasonal and interesting and offer either a point or a counterpoint to it. I know that's a lot at once, but all that boils down to say I went outside of my knowledge and I tried to look up recipes for Morels, and honestly, all of the best recipes I found are simply sautéed. So to break that down real quick, in case anyone listening is not experienced in the kitchen or whatever. You'll want to get yourself a saute pan, get it nice and hot. Throw whole butter in there, not oil, not clarified butter. You want whole butter because during the heating process, that's going to turn into brown butter, which is just delicious. Get your whole butter in there, get it hot, throw your Morels in, and let them chill out. Don't toss them, don't shake them around, don't try and be on chopped or whatever you're doing. Let them hang out and get a crispy edge. Then turn them once so they get another crispy edge. Then what I like to do is baste them with that brown butter at the end. So take that brown butter, tilt your skillet up a little bit, keep your Morels at the top, and use a spoon to kind of douse that brown butter onto the Morel. Then lay them out on a resting rack if you have one, or you can just lay out some paper towels and throw them on there so the butter drains off.
Yeah, and if I happen to be with you while you're doing this, when you're spooning that butter over, just take a spoonful and just drop it straight into my mouth, okay? Because that would
hurt incredibly bad.
No, I'll survive. I'll be all right. I got a chef's mouth. I can eat anything hot, straight out of the fryer, right into my mouth. Okay.
Yeah, 500-degree butter in the mouth. Yes, love that all day. So really, what you want to do with that is take those Morels after you've simply sauteed them with butter and a little salt, and then use that as an addition to anything else you want to do. First thing that comes to mind is a dinner I cooked not long ago where the side was just some sauteed asparagus and tomatoes. that would be a perfect vehicle to throw in some sautéed morels. Uh, it's kind of for this being our first ingredient, it's almost kind of difficult to describe recipes that you would want to use just because it is such a standalone ingredient. I'm gonna check out my notes here real quick. Um, yeah, and again, something I touched on earlier. Making a cream sauce, making something like that. That's as far as you want to go with this thing. It speaks for itself. It's the Morel ain't got no boss. Morel ain't got no daddy. It's his own thing.
I think it does, and I think its daddy is fat, right? Because you talk about sautéing in butter, you talk about cream. The great thing about a morel mushroom, and when I think about a morel recipe, what I want to see is I want to see a lot of umami fat for that morel to soak up and accentuate its flavor, not overpower it, just accentuate it, right? So I love what you said about sautéing it in butter. I think that's probably the best way to eat a morel is just simple sautéed in butter, a little kosher salt, a little cracked fresh black pepper. That's all you need. Okay. It's just like a steak. Okay. Because to me, that's what it is. It's a steak of mushrooms, right? And when I'm cooking a steak, I want salt, I want pepper, I want butter. That's it. And when I'm cooking morels, that's pretty much all I want. Now, if I want to do something a little different, traditionally around here, you might crust it with a little crushed up saltine cracker. You could use panko, but I like the saltine cracker idea a lot. It adds a special kind of crispiness to it, I think, that a panko doesn't do, because you get those
Yeah.
little chunks, those corners of the crackers and stuff that really give it a little extra bite, which is a really nice contrast to the kind of creamy interior that the morel gets after it's cooked. I
Well,
love the idea.
if you're feeling real sassy, get yourself a lemon. Throw a little lemon zest on there. I'm a firm believer in
Yeah,
fat is flavor, salt is taste, acid is life. If you don't have
yeah.
those three things in a dish, then yeah, then you're not doing it right. So, yeah, little lemon zest on there, maybe a little lime zest if you're feeling extra froggy. I don't know. Never mind. Maybe don't do the lime. I don't like that.
If you want a little bit better presentation, you can throw a little fresh parsley on there. A little fresh herb might. I mean, it's not going to mask the flavor. It's going to accentuate it. And it's going to give it a little green on there to make it pop. I really like what you said about the cream, and what I think of is a nice fettuccine, maybe a little Alfredo-ish creamy kind of sauce with where you take the morels, you puree some of them into the sauce, and then we also have some whole or chopped up morels in there as the texture. Instead of having a chicken or a salmon on it, you're going to have these whole beautiful mushrooms sitting on
Yeah,
top.
yeah. You want the if you're putting morels on a dish, especially a pasta, I think that is your protein there. Like that's the star of the show. Not only because you spent a lot of damn money on those morels and you better make it work, uh, but also because they're so delicious.
Yeah, they really are, and it's such a like almost like a steak-like mushroom that it's in a way it's if you put it with like a steak or something, they're gonna clash, right? They're both gonna want to be the star of the plate, and
Yeah,
you only
yeah,
need one star, and everything else on the plate needs to support, right? And
yeah, yeah. Absolutely agree with that.
yeah,
I think
so
that's
I
being sorry. I think that's just being faithful to an ingredient, and as we continue on this journey with different ingredients, I think one thing that I'm going to push a lot is that like creating creating a dish is not about throwing a lot of things together and making a mush and making things overcomplicated. I think all the best dishes that you're going to encounter, regardless of what the ingredient is, highlights that ingredient. It makes your produce, it makes your protein or whatever it is, the star of the show. You don't want to cover anything up. You don't want to mask anything. The goal, I think the goal of a good chef is to be the vehicle for the ingredient. And if you can showcase that faithfully, then you're winning.
yeah, and it's something I notice a lot in amateur cooks and stuff is that they always want to overdo it with stuff, right? Like if I'm gonna make macaroni and cheese, I'm gonna put so much cheese in this thing it becomes a log, you know. And it's like it's also about moderation, right? You want the everything to work together, and you don't just because something is your favorite part of it doesn't mean you just want to load it up with that, right? So let's talk about what are your top five mushrooms to close us out here, man.
Top 5 mushrooms. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't prepare. I didn't prepare for this one, but I
All
think
right,
I can.
I'll go first. I'll go first. Okay.
Okay, you go. You go
Um,
first. I'm gonna get my list together.
I'm gonna go backwards, right? I'm gonna start at 5 and go to 1. 5, I'm gonna go with the lion's mane or lion's beard. I think it's a really unique appearance, which is what I like about it. It does kind of look like a mane or a beard, but it also kind of looks like a waterfall to me, which is really cool. And I like the uniqueness of it. It does have a good flavor as well.
Do you ever just pet them?
Pet it, yeah. Why not, man?
Oh
You
yeah.
know,
They're so fun.
the texture of food is part of the joy of cooking. You know, and some of them are great textures, and some of them are slimy, but it's just all part of getting to know your food while you're cooking it, right? And for number 4, I'm going to go with the old standby, the workhorse of the fungi world, the white button mushroom. It's cheap, readily available. You can always find it at your store. If you learn how to cook those well, you're always going to be able to make great mushroom dishes. And a lot of people don't know this, but it's actually the same species as the cremini and the portobello. It's just picked earlier, right? So it starts as the white button, and then it gets its color, and it becomes the cremini or the baby bella, as they call it. And then eventually they get big and they become the portobello. So it's all the same thing. It's just along the state, through the stages, right? And the portobellos are obviously more expensive because they take more time to grow. I do like portobellos, by the way, and creminis. I love all mushrooms. It's hard to pick a top 5, but I picked the white
Blowing my
button.
mind. I didn't know they were the same thing.
Yeah, I picked the white button because it is like the workhorse, right? It's the one that you always see. It's the one that always gets used. The grocery store always has it. It holds up well. I don't know if you've noticed this about portobellos, but I think they turn a little bit faster than a white button does. It seems to get a little brown and soggy real quick.
Yeah, they get that blight on them. For anyone that's not aware, blight is a term for when a mushroom has too much moisture, and you start to get like a white film and a gummy texture on the outside. And generally that means you missed your window. You want to toss those out.
Yeah, if you're poor like me, you might just eat it anyway. Just cook it real hard and just pray. But number 3 for me, the chanterelle. I love its color. It's got a
Beautiful,
gorgeous, deep yellow color. It's got a very deep, woodsy flavor, and it's got an interesting shape, and that's what I liked about the lion's mane. It's what I like about the chanterelle. It's just how cool it looks. It looks fancy, right? When I open when I get a box of chanterelles at work, when I was a cook, or when I see them at the store, I'm just like, man, now that looks like it's gonna make a fancy meal right there. Like somebody's really gonna do something special with that.
ooh, fancy.
Number 2 for me is the Morel. And it's hard to put it at 2. I mean, it was really hard because I have such a love for Morels, and it's so they're hard to find year round, and you only get them for a short window. But I had to put it at
number 1. Then
I had to put it
put the
at number
headliner in.
2 because number 1, the truffle is a mushroom. So, I mean, if you are a culinarian, how can you not love the truffle? There's nothing on earth that tastes like a truffle.
That seems like a cheat code.
It is, and that's why it's like, I mean, I could have made the 5. We could have said without truffle, but we didn't. So
we did no.
For me, it has to be the truffle.
Got me on a technicality, bro. Damn.
If you've never had a truffle, you got to go try one. Don't get the canned stuff. Go find somewhere to get it fresh. One of my favorite meals of my life. My wife and I went to Washington, D.C., and we're trying to eat at a couple of the Michelin-starred places. And some of them were great. Some of them were but my favorite meal from the whole thing was actually something my wife got, which is a white truffle risotto with a whole ostrich egg yolk on top of it raw, right?
Oh,
and then we had to pay an extra $75. Now, this was 5 years ago, so now it probably costs $150. But we had to pay an extra $75 to get the waiter to come by with a whole white truffle and do fresh shavings over the top. And she had never had truffles at that point. And so I was like, well, if you've never had them, then we have to get the upcharge, right? We have to do that, right? And I took a couple bites of it, and I was like, why did I get the tasting menu? I should have just ordered that. Like, this is like the tasting menu was fantastic. It was wonderful. It was one of my favorite meals that I've eaten in my life, and I was so jealous of what my wife had in front of her. So for me,
I
number one, the
spent
truffle.
a little time in DC. Real quick, what was the restaurant where you had that at?
Honestly, off the top of my head, I don't remember the name of it. We went to 3 or 4 of them. I can remember the name of the bad one we went to, the duck something, the duck.
Okay.
I'm gonna bring this up on the next episode. I'm gonna. It's
Yeah,
it's been
please do. Please. Other than Nashville, DC is the only kind of area that I've spent some time. So I'm very interested to where you had a good experience. I've
yeah,
got a
it's
couple.
killing me. I can't remember the name of it. I wasn't prepared. That story just popped into my head when I started talking about truffles, and yeah,
Okay,
I
so
do remember it was so fancy that they brought out a stool from my wife's purse. And I don't drink, and at the time I didn't drink, and they had like a whole like when they heard that I wanted non-alcoholic, they brought out this whole cart of these specialty juices that this guy and this former chef in France makes, where he like grows it with like thyme and like I had like a thyme infused apple juice, and it was
ooh,
like it's just like, one of the best meals of my life. But go
give me
ahead.
that. Hey. Uh, okay, so top five. I did not prepare for this. I'm gonna have to go off the dome here. Honestly, I'll stay true to the app. I think my number one is gonna be a Morel. Pretty easily. We've talked a lot about it. About my young baby Matt memories and all that. It has a special place in my heart and a special place on my palate. It's absolutely wonderful. Um, Number two is going to be the maitake, the hen of the woods that I touched on earlier. It's got such an interesting, faithful texture when you prepare it the right way with like a roast or something like that. You get crispy edges, you get a meaty interior. I use it a lot for substitute on proteins when I do events like weddings and conferences and big events. Somebody wants maybe like a skewered like yakitori situation, but they don't want a protein. They want it to be vegetarian. Throw some maitakes on there, give it a little soy based, and just coal roast it. Beautiful, beautiful. Uh, Number three, because of the name and because of how amazingly cute they are, is the han shimeji, also known as the beach mushroom. So if you picture the most cartoon looking mushroom possible, you are thinking of a beach mushroom. They have those tiny little stalks and the perfectly round heads. You got to trim them with scissors.
Don't eat
You
the stalk.
do what?
So don't eat the stalk.
Yeah, don't do that. But yeah, they are adorable. And again, I just love saying hon shimeji, so we'll just keep doing that. Uh, Number three, again, I'll stick with aesthetics. I'm going to go with the enoki, which is kind of like a hanshimeji, but very long. Super long stems, tiny little bulbs at the top. Great for a garnish. You might see them in they're a great garnish for like a bowl of ramen. You can just put some fresh enoki mushrooms on there, and you're good to go. Ooh, well, now I'm getting down there.
We're running out of spots. That's the problem. There's too many mushrooms, not enough spots. We should have done
Dude,
top 10.
there are way too many. Okay, so I'm gonna go with porcini mushroom, specifically a dried porcini. Uh, Fresh mushrooms are incredible, but there are a lot of recipes that I like to make mushroom stocks and broths with, and a dried porcini mushroom really fills in flavor. So they're not expensive. They're pretty easy to find. So if you find yourself some porcini powder or some dried porcini mushrooms, make a stock the same way you would a beef or a chicken stock. Put in some aromatics, some vegetables. Use the mushroom as your focus, and you really got something special going on there. Um, oh man, I don't want to play it like picks are off the board, but I'm also gonna take truffle, but I'm gonna put it all the way down at number five. I think I think a lot of times these days, truffle is overused, especially when it comes to something like a truffle infused oil. Because I am one of those people. I think when you put truffle oil in a dish, the entire dish becomes a truffle oil dish. It overtakes everything. It's invasive. It masks everything else that's going on in the dish, which is why it's good for potatoes. Um, but a good fresh truffle, like shaved or properly treated or incorporated into a sauce or like a vegetable bolognese or a lasagna or something. I think a good use of a truffle is a very important and awesome thing. Uh, so I'm getting blown up right now. I'm sorry. uh, so the people are arguing with me about truffles like in real time. uh,
No,
but
that's
yeah,
a good list, Matt. I like your list. I
hell
think
yeah.
I think you hit a lot of high spots. You hit a lot of the things that I didn't hit. Like I said, it's when you're doing top five, it's really hard with mushrooms because there's so many great ones, right?
There's so many, so
But
many.
we are out of time. It's been an hour. We've been talking about mushrooms for an hour.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I feel like I could talk more, but this is our show. We're an hour. So
All right, here we go.
before we go, I'd like to ask you guys out there something. I'd like you to show us your dirt, right? Show us what you're eating. Show us what you're cooking. Send it to us on Twitter at The Dirty Belly, on Instagram at The Dirty Belly, on Facebook, The Dirty Belly Show. Send us some pictures of what you're eating, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to tell you how
Show
good it
us your
looks.
bellies, baby.
We're
I
going
want
to
to see
tell you
that
how.
belly.
Yeah, we're gonna tell you how dirty it is. You know, so we want this to be an audience participation show where you guys are sending in your food, we're learning about what you're eating, and we can tell you more about what you've eaten, and we can learn from you guys. And if you have tips about mushrooms, you heard something on here you liked and you want to tell us about it, you heard something you didn't hear something and you want us to mention it, then let us know. You know, we would love to hear from you.
We're gonna learn and grow as we do this show. I really look forward to my own knowledge and at the same time sharing that knowledge. So yeah,
Yeah, we're
hit me
growing
up.
along with you guys. Yeah, just like mushrooms in the forest. You know what I mean? We're just poking our little. Right now, we're poking our little heads up and see a little sunshine. Uh, Also, some shout outs to our fellow shows on Rivet City Radio.
Yeah.
Nerdy News at 4:20 Eastern Time. Nerdy News 4:20 at 4:20 Eastern Time, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And Tea and Hot Takes at 8 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow, both on Rivet City Radio. Shout out to you guys. Good luck on your shows. I know you're going to do great.
Dude, shout out Rivet City, shout out Will and Al and everybody that's helped put this together so quickly. It all came together so fast, and I'm so excited to be a part of it. So hell yeah to everybody on the network. Let's go.
Oh man, somebody just gifted a sub. Wow. Sledge it real good. Way to be a bro or a girl bro or whatever you are. I don't know. It's hard to tell people's genders with the names, but
That's
that's
a
cool, man.
quality
Hey,
human there.
giving is awesome, man. Giving is the greatest thing you can do in life. I personally believe that, and I think that's great that you would gift a sub to somebody. Shout out to you, my man or woman, my person.
Or
How
woman.
about that? My person,
We'll go
my
with
people. Yeah.
that.
And thank you all for being on this culinary journey with us. This is Thank you to all you hungry homies for joining us today on our journey of learning more about the food we eat. And we're out.